And we're live. Let's go ahead and hit the theme song. Greetings, mortals, peers and queers. Welcome to another episode of Late Night Serotonin, where me and a group of other content creators talk about topical issues that are affecting us from differing perspectives. Today, we're going to be talking about Trump's new latest genocidal speech, Florida's book bans, and migrants being shipped around the country, being used as pawns by the Republicans. We got a great show for you tonight. So, folks, to give you a bit of an introduction, this show is held every week. We ask you like and subscribe, support us on Patreon as we grow and make better and better shows. We've got our guest, Astro, who's going to shout themselves out right now.
Hey everybody, I'm Astrofeminist. My primary platform is on TikTok, and I talk about a variety of subjects, primarily from a feminist standpoint. Lately, I've been focusing a lot on like the abortion discussion, all of that. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and check me out on TikTok. And yeah.
All right, PK, give us an introduction.
Howdy, everybody. I'm PK. I do a lot of different content creation, primarily on TikTok, also under the handle PKK Dakota. If you search that up, you can also find a couple of my other projects, like my bird photography and things like that. But yeah.
All right, folks, and for those of you who may be joining us for the first times, I'm Lady Avalon, the host of Serotonin Studios. I'm a transgender, lesbian, socialist, polyamorous, disabled atheist, and I'm also a ginger. Find which one of those you find most offensive and comment down below. With that, let's go ahead and get into tonight's opening monologue. Trump's latest speech. Wow, it's been making the rounds across the internet, across lefty and political and news spaces, because it's pretty bad. And I want to go ahead and read this article here, just to give the audience a bit of a prime. Trump promises to go after trans people if he's reelected. He says that his Department of Justice will investigate hospitals that treat transgender kids and threatened schools that support trans students. Former President Donald Trump says that one of his top priorities if he's reelected in 2024 will be a sweeping federal rollback of transgender rights. His proposed plans hinge on harmful anti-trans myths often touted by the far right and appear to be part of an effort to outdo Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a likely opponent for the 2020 presidential nomination. Last week, Trump proposed an education plan that's even more extreme than the policies DeSantis has implemented, and DeSantis has also gone after LGBTQ people, including via his infamous Don't Say Gay bill, which prohibits discussion of gender identity and sexuality between kindergarten and third grade, and also prohibits topics for older kids if lessons aren't deemed, quote, age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate, end quote. The left-wing gender insanity is being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple, Trump said in a video posted online. Trump said that he wants to, quote, stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of the, end quote, of the youth in the U.S. And he said that he'll go after hospitals and healthcare providers who presumably offer gender-affirming care. He also said that he would create a, quote, private right of action, end quote, and would allow victims to sue doctors who have, quote, unforgivably performed these procedures on minors and children. Trump added that his Department of Justice would investigate big pharma and big hospital networks for what he claimed is a deliberate cover-up of the side effects to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients. To be clear, studies show that trans people are more likely than cisgender people to experience mental health struggles, including anxiety, depression, PTSD, and thoughts of suicide. Nearly half of all LGBTQ youth have seriously considered suicide, but those issues cannot be mitigated with puberty blockers can be mitigated with puberty blockers and other gender-affirming therapies, which are safe and effective and are correlated with better mental health outcomes for trans people. Teens who are able to access gender-affirming therapy typically have better mental health outcomes than trans people who've had to wait until adulthood. Hundreds of thousands of trans kids in the U.S. are currently receiving safe and critical gender-affirming care, which has been endorsed by major medical governing bodies, including the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Psychiatric Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. But contrary to what many conservatives claim, it's not easy to get access to gender-affirming care. As one of the many trans kids previously told Vice News, it took a long time and many steps before her son was able to begin his medical transition. The family saw multiple doctors and had to participate in several family interviews, including solo interviews with the son. Quote, it's not like it's all being presented on Fox News. It's not like going to get an antibiotic. It's a process, end quote. In the video, Trump also nods at the sports participation restrictions for trans students and says that under his plan, teachers and school districts could face, quote, severe consequences if they suggest that a child could be trapped in the wrong body. Trump's video echoes the ongoing right-wing attacks on trans people's rights and participation in public life. Republicans have introduced hundreds of anti-trans bills in dozens of state legislatures across the country, from restrictions to trans athletes in sports to bans on gender-affirming care altogether. Last year, attacks on transgender people escalated to such a pitch in the United States that anti-trans hate became so intense in the U.S. that experts questioned whether it constituted a genocide. In the 2022 midterms, conservative candidates spent a shocking amount, $50 million, on anti-trans campaign ads, including flyers and TV spots during the 2022 midterms. Quote, the radical left will destroy America if we don't stop them. They indoctrinate our children and try and turn boys into girls, said Florida Senator Marco Rubio in a TV ad. As he ramps up his 2024 run, Trump appears to be pursuing a similar strategy, repeating harmful misinformation and straight-up lying about the history and science of gender identity. Quote, we will promote positive education about the nuclear family, said Trump in a nearly 4-minute video. The roles of mothers and fathers celebrating rather than erasing things to make men and women different and unique, end quote. Trump said he will also ask Congress to pass bills that establish male and female as the only genders recognized by the U.S. government, and they'll be assigned at birth, he said. Quote, no serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody has ever heard of this. What's happening today? It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago. This is another lie. Transgender non-binary identities aren't new, and while the term transgender was coined in the 1960s, people have been challenging the narrow definitions of gender since antiquity. So we have several things I want to touch on with this. First off, this idea that trans people are really just being used as pawns. It was alluded here when we talked about how he's trying to outdo Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for a 2024 presidential run. I genuinely don't think that some of these Republican leaders care. I think they're utterly ambivalent to trans people as a whole. This is only just the latest step in the culture war. This is the tip of the wedge. And they're just trying to win points by being performatively cruel in more extreme ways. We see this most clearly with Trump's latest speech as he throws his hat in the ring, with Ron DeSantis, and with Governor Greg Abbott in the last several years. They've been ramping up their rhetoric, ramping up the cruelty, ramping up the legislations, becoming even more draconian and restrictive, and infringing on the rights of free people and free Americans just to win political points so that they can score for the next campaign. But what is the effect of all this? Sure, maybe they don't personally care about trans people, but what is the effect of their actions? Well, with things like the Don't Say Gay bill, or total bans on trans healthcare, depriving a group of people of their healthcare and trying to shut them out of public life, is a form of genocide. Refusing to speak about a group of people in schools, not allowing them to be shown in public, that is heavily discriminatory and is evocative of some of the legislation and movements of Nazi Germany. And that's kind of the direction we're heading in. Not to give the game away, but these are fascist positions. They have picked a minority to be the tip of the wedge, and they are going after it whole hog with maximum cruelty in order to achieve their own political ends. We're going to talk about that from a couple of different perspectives. My guests are going to dig into it. But even though that the Republicans are using certain minorities as pawns, as chess pieces, so that they can move along their own political careers, that doesn't make them any less dangerous, and that doesn't make the damage that they wreak any more harmful. You know, trans people are depending on healthcare, and now it's being stripped away from them. And we know for a fact that that is going to make the mental health outcomes of those minorities much, much worse and much, much harder. They are making the lives of minorities harder for their own political gain, and we have to stop them. People's lives depend on this. Not only just like for medicine, but also like it is flatly morally wrong to ban trans people from ever participating in like school, being talked about. Hell, being able to go to a teacher and say, hey, I think I feel like I'm in the wrong body, and knowing that you're safe there is a really important step. We know that that simple acceptance from your peers or from authority figures around you vastly improves the mental health outcomes of transgender youth. And to be clear, since we're talking about the youth, these people do not care about the youth. They don't care about children. They never have. They never will. The children, the think of the children argument, is also just a prop. It's just a political crowbar to get their way. Let's see. Was it Trump said that he would institute a ban on... No, I don't think it was Trump. It was another Republican who said that they would institute a ban on all genital related mutilation surgeries. But you know what's not a part of those bills? You know, they're trying to stop trans people from getting health care. You know what's not a part of bills that would ban gender reassignment surgeries, ban gender mutilation surgeries of any kind? Circumcision. Circumcision is by definition a mutilation of a child's genitalia, and yet the Republicans are whole hog on that, but are totally against gender reassignment surgery. They don't care about the children at all. I'm going to wrap up my speech there. And
I'd like to add too that
go ahead.
on that point in particular, I'd like to also add that growing up in a very red area, I knew girls that were on hormone blockers from the age of like 9 and 10 years old because they started developing early. Like, it is a very common practice in churches and things like that, to where if your daughter is, you know, maturing too soon, they'll take her to the doctor and be like, hey, doc, put my child on hormone blockers. So they were okay with it when it's their daughters developing breasts, but now that it's someone else's kid, they're like, no, it can't be the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Puberty blockers have been used for multiple decades to treat multiple illnesses, and is now being used for transgender youth, and it's completely safe and completely reversible. And despite what conservatives may tell you, yes, it is completely safe. It is completely reversible. The studies are in. We have long-term studies and short-term studies, and we have studies of a significant statistical size. With that, I turn it over to Astro.
Thank you. So I think that one of the things that they really kind of cling on to is I'm not sure if I can use the actual word like on TikTok, but the S word, unaliving, is something that they really cling to when it comes to this discussion. But they conveniently leave out that a lot of that is due to the stigma that they create and perpetuate against these people. So they're always trying to push that, well, it's dangerous because they're more likely to do this, and to this is a very real possibility for them. And I think that that's creating like this moral panic, and it's coming from a place of like just trying to deceive the general public in them the actually caring. As you said, they don't actually care. They're just trying to push their own narrative and make this reality, and using these cherry-picked statistics um, to make those claims. And I think that for the most part, people are kind of starting to see through it. Unfortunately, people like Trump, for whatever reason, still have the platform that he does. And another topic I kind of wanted to touch on, and not to take away from the discussion of trans individuals, but some of the things that he was focusing on was also critical race theory being taught in schools. And I think that makes it basically says that unless the curriculum that is being taught in schools is Eurocentric, then it's somehow taking power away from whiteness. And I think that's also a really dangerous rhetoric that he's kind of pushing out there. And we can see that the book ban that I was going to kind of discuss later, it disproportionately affects Black authors and authors of color in general. In these topics. So I think that that's, as you talked about the fascism aspect of it earlier, like it's so blatantly just meeting all the criteria. And I remember a couple years ago, like the radical left is going to be banning the books. Like that was something they accused like the left of doing, but now they're doing with no abandon. So I don't know how they don't see the irony in all of that, but it's beyond me.
Yeah, absolutely. We are entering in a pretty scary time. While the Democrats hold the Senate and the White House, Republicans in red states are making things increasingly worse, and they're going to try for the presidency in 2 years, or in 1 year, and that's going to be a scary time because they have built narratives where either they win, they were always going to win, and nothing could stop them from winning, or if they lose, then it was stolen. They don't have a condition where they lost fairly. It's either they won or it was stolen from them. And that's kind of scary because these people are getting increasingly violent. We are seeing the slow descent from conservatism into fascism, and that's unnerving, and it doesn't bode well for any minorities that might be stuck in those red states. Like Texas has a Republican legislature, Republican governor, and yet is still stuck in it's the second most populous state in the union. We can't just ask all minorities to leave Texas. That's just not a feasible solution. So we have to find strategies to defeat these Republicans and take back our homes from this growing tide of insanity. I'm in a red state, and I'm studying to get my degree in political science so that I can get into politics, get into the administration, and start fighting these at the local level, and make my change, here in my home. We are absolutely going to see, as we've seen over the past 2 years, their rhetoric increase. We're going to see it keep increasing. They are less and less concerned with euphemisms and shorthands and winks and nods, and instead they are being a lot more explicit and a lot more vicious. Now, a couple of years back, 2014, 2015, right? The conversation conservatives had around trans people was, oh, I sympathize with their mental illness, but like these silly people don't understand that they have a penis. They don't understand basic biology. Whereas now we've escalated to the rhetoric of, oh, these evil degenerate monsters are trying to groom our children and we have to protect them by, well, they leave the rest of that speech implied. If they're smart and they're explicit in forums and in comment sections, if they're not very smart. But we know where that rhetoric is going, and it's going to keep heading in that direction. It's going to keep getting worse. They're already talking about national bans on healthcare, reassignment surgery. They're trying to prosecute doctors for administering medicine that is, by all major medical institutions, deemed safe reliable, and helpful. And yet they don't care, because it's not about the medicine for them. It's not like a reason, like they need to hear a rational argument, like, oh, actually, here's all of the data that shows that actually trans people, have better mental health outcomes, anything like that. They don't care about the medical. They don't care about the science. They've abandoned that long ago. What they care about is the power. They care about is calling people like me just degenerate simply for existing, simply for living. And they want to attack people like me for that purpose, because it gains them political points, it gains them political power, it wins them elections. Or, well, actually, it was winning them elections. But as we saw with 2022, a lot of candidates that were hitting on the anti-trans legislation lost or didn't perform nearly as well as they thought they were going to, because turns out supporting trans people is a rather popular position. This is the dichotomy between the Republican Party and the rest of the country, is that the politicians seem to be wrapped up in their own world of escalating rhetoric and violence towards minorities and trans people. Whereas a lot of the rest of the United States and around the world, we're actually seeing a lot of progress being made in those areas of helping trans people and queer people, and normalizing relations, and people becoming more accepting of those groups. Hell, I just did a video on Slovenia, an Eastern European country, legalizing gay marriage, which was a first for the region. And they just did that last Tuesday. And now we're seeing in the United States with the midterms passed, we saw that a lot of the rhetoric of anti-trans legislation and platforms of anti-trans didn't do so well, because Gen Z showed up in record numbers and turned the red wave into a pink splash. And so I think there is a bit of hope to have, that while the Republicans are growing increasingly detached from the rest of the world and the rest of the United States, and while they are still a dangerous and present threat that we have to deal with and watch carefully and defeat in every way we can, I don't want us to get so stuck in the doomer pill of like, yes, a former president is calling for the elimination of health care for minorities. That is quite awful. But also, he's kind of detached, and he probably won't win. So we can take a bit of hope from that, of these positions that they hold. Yes, they're getting more violent, but they're also a lot less popular than these politicians think. And they don't seem to be smart enough at this stage to stop doubling and tripling down on these positions. They're committed to the hatred. They're committed to the cruelty. And that does not win them as much support as they would like. So I turn it over to my guests.
Something that I think that I've noticed.
I think.
Go ahead, PK. You haven't spoken
You
really
go
pretty
ahead.
much at all. No, I went on a long tangent earlier. You're good.
I was gonna say, where my friend group and my colleague group is people triple and quadruple my age. A lot of them were in their 20s and 30s back in the 80s, and it's kind of, when I hear from their perspective about how the talks with trans people now are kind of almost mirroring what was happening in the late 70s, early 80s with gay people. They were calling for the eradication. When AIDS happened, it was everyone blamed gay people. And even in today, like with supporting LGBT youths and just LGBTQ communities in general, when it comes to the average voter, and I'm talking about like not people eligible or registered, I'm just talking about the average people year after year that vote, while it is popular to support them, to most people that vote, that priority falls under a lot of other things. And that's why you see Republicans knowing what are the key issues, what are people's like top 3 issues, like economy and things like that. LGBTQ communities fall just under that. So this is like really nothing new from Republicans. It's just a new veneer. It's just updated for 2023. And a lot of people like I was born in '94, so I obviously wasn't there in the '80s. But the way they talk about it is it took decades of fighting on state and local levels, winning people's hearts and minds on those small scales. And, finally, 40, 50 years later, that's when being gay started to finally be normalized a little bit. And with the current generation, we're so used to having it right now and getting instantaneous gratification that it's really damning that these people, they might vote in one election, don't get the outcome they want, and then they turn straight to, well, electoralism doesn't work. I'm never voting again. Voting never does anything. And they don't understand that it's not just, oh, yeah, I went and voted one time, everything's fixed. It's we have to organize, keep the people that do get elected in check, and if they're not moving towards a more equitable society, we have to do everything we can to get them primaried or get the other side to win.
Wise
That's what I was
words.
going to say.
Wise words from Dakota. Astro, you were going to talk about the book bans in Florida. This is, I think, a great companion piece.
Yes. Also, great point, Dakota. You brought up the local level, and I genuinely do think that this is going to be like a bottom to top change that's going to have to take place. So excellent point all around. But yeah, the book bans in Florida, it is now a felony to have available certain books within a classroom. And when I say felony, it means that if there is access to these books, a teacher can be arrested and like taken away in handcuffs in front of their students. And part of me thinks that this is almost it's like a show of force, like, because it could be a misdemeanor, it could be something that you're fine to do, but this is a genuine, like, you're not going to be able to do this, we're going to set the tone, we're going to send a message, and literally being arrested for having a book available. And as I was saying earlier, it disproportionately affects a lot of minority authors, including authors of color. And so just the parallels to straight fascism that this is, and the fact that these people can't see how much it resembles other instances in history where this has been an issue, is beyond me. And so these books have to be authorized by a certified librarian, or I can bring up the actual term. Basically, it has to be cleared by a qualified school media specialist trained by the state, must give their approval for these books. And it's the article I'm referencing says that it even can apply to books that aren't controversial necessarily, and it can apply to concepts such as arithmetic and mathematics, simply because it doesn't necessarily meet that criteria. So this is just something that's, I don't understand how people can't see this as straight up fascism. Like, this is literally the book banning issue. Like, we're right there.
Making it a class 3 felony, and that forces school systems to go, hey, teachers, you need to lock up all of your libraries, all of it, because each individual book has to be approved before it can be put back on your shelves. Therefore, all of your books need to be made unavailable until they've been approved. And they have to be approved by one person, which creates a massive bottleneck. You're thinking, dozens of teachers, dozens of classrooms, hundreds of books. Thousands.
Like, more than that, probably.
I think what this makes me think of is also, conservatives have always been pretty anti-education, anti-higher learning. And a part of that has also been like the homeschool system. I reported on just like a week ago, in Ohio, they found a homeschooling group, a Facebook group with 3,000 members, and they were Nazis. They were white supremacists, and they were Nazis. They were teaching that MLK was an evil man, and that the government is controlled by, gay Afro Zionists, whatever. I want to make it clear. Attacking the education system is one of the tools of fascism, because well-educated minds tend to be against these conservative movements, against fascism. They tend to resist that. They tend to be more liberal, more open-minded, and more accepting of minorities, because they have a better understanding of those issues. Whereas Republicans, as we saw in the article that I read a little bit ago, they will just straight up lie and spread misinformation about sensitive topics just to fuel their political campaigns. Whereas if you have a very well-educated populace with a very robust education system, it's going to be much harder to lie to them, because they're going to be able to see through the bullshit a lot faster. I'm going to go ahead and have each of my guests give their closing statements and wrapping up for the tonight. Tonight will be a bit of a shorter show. Folks, do be sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. Share this video as much as possible to give it a boost. Give left-leaning voices a boost against the rising tide of fascism. With that, I'll turn it over to Astro. Go ahead and sign us out.
Yeah, so just one quick last comment. Kind of something that I've noticed about the Republican Party over the last several years is that kind of what you were saying back in 2014, how they were just kind of like, these people just don't know biology. Whenever a movement that they don't necessarily agree with starts gaining traction, they realize that they have to up the ante a little bit against these people, to kind of really fight against them. So with that rise in the science, the data, the research behind transgenderism and all kinds of other topics that essentially prove them wrong, and as you were just saying, the anti-intellectual aspect of their rhetoric really backs them into a corner and causes them to have to lash out. And I think that's part of the reason why we see so much violence against these groups of people, is because they are backed into a corner. They have no other outlet other than to say, like, well, these people are grooming our kids. These people are, they're coming for you. So that's pretty much their last resort, that what they have. And not to diminish it or minimize it, it is still very much dangerous, but I do think, like, we have to remind ourselves that the information is not on their side, and they can only argue and threaten violence for so long until they actually have to pony up, basically. So we'll see where that goes. I'm Astrofeminist. Check out my content on TikTok, a variety of all kinds of stuff. Feminism, leftist, abortion discussion and debates. Check me out.
All right. PK Dakota, go ahead and give your closing statement and shout yourself out.
Yeah, I think a lot of great points were made by everyone tonight. The Republican Party is very good at punching down and trying to find the smallest community to kind of like beat up on. And they kind of have this weird tokenism type of trait in the party where they'll always find like one gay person or one black person that they can kind of tout and go, look, see, we have one of these. Everyone should vote for us. We don't hate everybody. We just don't like anyone. And it's kind of a weird dichotomy in that aspect. And I hope a lot of people who are genuinely serious about combating the rise of fascism, because I have like two homes, Virginia and North Carolina, that I spend equal amounts of time in. And the one shooting of the substation in North Carolina near Mooresville, that made a lot of news headlines, but there's been other shootings since. Like, I have friends in Statesville who are affected by them shooting up the Statesville substation. So they're already enacting acts of violence and terrorism inside certain states where they have a slight majority. And I wish everyone would kind of just come together, because there are solutions, but not everyone can agree to push the rock up the hill in the same direction. Everyone wants to push the rock in different directions. So I hope in the coming years, as more and more of the Gen Z get into politics and are like, finally, I get to have my voice heard. I hope they keep having their voice heard like they did in this past midterm. But yeah, with all the book bans too, I'm going to try to do more content because I have videos where I do reading by campfire where I read like children's books. So I'm going to try to do that more because I don't know, maybe they'll all be banned and I can't get them anymore. But yeah, check me out on PKK Dakota on TikTok. It's good to see everybody.
All right. And remember, folks, both of my guests will be linked in the description down below. And, you know, on the point of Republicans finding, you know, token minorities, they lucked out. They got George Santos, who is actually every single minority all at once, depending on what day of the week you ask him. With that, folks, I'm going to go ahead and give the closing statement. Remember, do not give up on hope. That is what our enemies wish. It makes their job easier when we're not fighting. We are winning. We are making progress. Where they control, we are seeing setbacks. We are seeing rollbacks. We are seeing things get worse. And they likely will continue trying to make things worse. But we have to keep fighting. If not for our own sake, then for the sake of people we care about, and even the people we don't know, but whom we want to see live full and happy lives. The fight must continue. We crushed them in 2022 midterms. We blew out Donald Trump in 2020. In 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024. Get organized. Make friends, get to know people, learn the skill sets, and join the fight. With that, I'm going to wish you all a good evening.